Okay, well, let's get started. We've got quite a packed agenda today. So hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar on how to write a manuscript, expert advice on getting published. My name is Helen Kimball, and I'm the journal manager for Frontiers in Agronomy. We're a new open access journal in the field, so please do go and check out the latest research we're publishing. Today's webinar is being run by our field chief editor, John R. Porter, and Bhagirath Chauhan, who runs our journal section on weed management. The aim here is to give you some expert advice on how to prepare a manuscript to improve your chances of getting published. We hope this presentation is a useful resource for those of you starting your journey into publishing, or for those of you who just need a refresher. Before I hand over to John, who will start the webinar, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping rules. So first of all, this webinar is being recorded, and the video will be shared with you and on our Frontiers YouTube page. The presentation will last for about an hour, after which we're going to have a question and answer session with our speakers, and that's going to last about 30 minutes. Could you please submit all of your questions for the speakers during the talk using the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom window? You can do this throughout the presentation. You can make your questions anonymous if you want to, that's completely up to you. As we have quite a lot of people joining us here today, we're going to collect your questions and we'll read these to John and Bhagirath at the end of the presentation. One other thing, once the webinar is over, we'll send you a brief questionnaire to fill in. This is our first time running this webinar and we want to make sure that it's useful, so we'd really appreciate your feedback. There will be space here as well to ask any additional questions about writing a manuscript that do not get answered in today's Q&A session. And with that, I'd like to hand over to John, who will talk you through our agenda for today and introduce our speakers. Take it away, John.
Okay, thank you very much, Helen. And also I'd like to bid everybody a warm welcome to this webinar, this seminar that we're running. The idea of this seminar really came out of some discussions that we were having about how we could help people who wanted to publish papers in agronomy, how they could perhaps avoid some of the errors and some of the problems that accompany young researchers. I remember my own time as a young researcher and how one had to learn really how to write a scientific paper. One of the things I would like to just mention really is that this is really a public service that we're trying to do here. This is not an idea of trying to plug Frontiers in Agronomy. What we're trying to do here is to help, generally speaking, the scientific community to have an easier time when they're trying to write a manuscript. So if we could move to the agenda. Well, first of all, I should perhaps introduce our two speakers. My name is, as I said, John Porter, and I'm the chief editor of Frontiers in Agronomy. My background has been in plant population biology. This is where I started, and then I got into simulation modeling of crops. And from 1994, I was a member of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And probably the most important thing I did for IPCC was to chair the food security chapter in the 5th assessment report. My colleague Bhagirath Chauhan from University of Queensland in Australia has also a very well-established record in research and also in teaching. He comes from Haryana in India, but spent a lot of his time working in the Erie for the International Cigar Institute in Erie. He's now a professor at the University of Queensland in Australia, and is a member of many international weed science societies. But he's not just a weed scientist; he's also interested in crop ecology and all things which are relevant to agronomy. So the agenda for today is that Bhagirath is really going to make the main presentation. He has much more experience in doing this than I have, so I'm really pleased that he's going to take this on board. Why publish? What is the publishing cycle? How you might go about preparing your manuscript? And then there are issues about ethics and integrity when you're publishing papers. How you might consider choosing a journal, and then just a summary of the top tips that we could give you for getting published. And then, as Helen said, we'll go and have some questions and answers when you're free to ask anything you want about either about the presentation or about publishing in general. If we could move to the next slide, please, Bhagirath. This is just an outline of Frontiers in Agronomy. We're a very new journal. We've been going for just over nearly 2 years now. And we've published about 150 papers so far. We're divided into 7 sections, and on the right-hand side, you can see all the very international group of specialty chief editors that we have. We come from all over the world, Europe, North America, Israel, France, and I'm really, really pleased about that because we wanted to be a very international. And we're also trying very, very hard to increase the number of women we have involved in our chief editor group. So that's an outline of Frontiers in Agronomy. And now I would like to hand over to Bhagirath, who's going to make the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. So this is my favorite topic. I have presented this to different universities, especially in low-income countries, or you can say where we have not really seen much about publication. So I'll start there without wasting much time. First thing is, why do we publish? And we know that for a scientist, scientific articles, they are the primary method of communication. Once article has been approved by editors and reviewers, it is published in a journal. And then it becomes a part of a permanent record of research. And that's also very important to know that sometimes if you publish in a predatory type of journal, that also become a permanent record of research. So it means you need to be careful with there. And in this way, the history of knowledge grows. And I think we all know how important is this publication. And getting your research published is an extremely important part of your career. Also, I think it's very important for me also. It doesn't matter if you are an excellent scientist, if you can't really communicate this to your peers and a broader audience. Now, if we cover a few of these aspects, publish or perish, and I think this is not really anything new, okay? To maintain your career, you need to know, you need to show that you can produce and communicate high quality work. Second is recognition of your work. So your papers, they are actually your currency, if you say, and it's very important. Awareness and visibility for your research. And this is very important. And when we are talking about nowadays these open access options, for example, our Frontiers in Agronomy, so awareness is very important. Also, when you publish, results are confirmed by your peers through peer review. So you know that these papers, they go through at least one editor and 2 reviewers. So you know that your results are confirmed by your reviewers. And to me, this is very important. When I was doing PhD, and sometimes you can't really find, you know, details, or you can't really replicate or repeat the same kind of paper or same kind of trials because their methodology is not really clear. So that's only just one example. So findings from one paper can be built on by your peers, and we can move this field forward. So that's very important. Now, people, they submit their manuscript, but sometimes I also get very, authors are very frustrated. They say that, oh, my manuscript was rejected without sending to reviewers. But it's not really that easy. And some journals or publishers, they handle thousands of manuscripts per year. So it's not really that, it's very time consuming. So what happens when a manuscript is received? It will undergo quality check to make sure it fits the scope. And that is very, very important. Sometimes we think that, oh, let's try here. By chance, if this is accepted, then it's fine. No, I think you are delaying your manuscript by that way. If you do not know, or if you do not really study the scope, then I think it's really you are delaying your manuscript and quality criteria of the journal. So manuscripts, if they don't meet that criteria, then they are rejected without review. And in that one, I'm not saying they may be very good of high quality, but because they don't really fall under that scope. Now, those articles that are not rejected, they are sent to associate editors here. Now, associate editors, they see, and they may reject if they see that, because they usually, first of all, I think if I say according to my experience, I don't really see that time, much about language or other things. I just see technical or scientific quality. So if your associate editor don't find really that of scientific quality, they will again reject it and send it to you back. Now, why is that? Because nowadays, if you see, it's very, very hard to find reviewers. And their time is also not, and it's not really, these are paid services. Reviewers are also full-time faculty or other members. So we need to really send those manuscripts which actually meets these criteria. So this is very important. So it can be rejected. But after that one, and before, as I mentioned earlier, all manuscripts are handled by at least one associate editor and at least 2 reviewers. In my case, it all depends on if I feel that, okay, one reviewer rejected, one accepted. So there are 2 options people, they try. One is either the editors, they become as another reviewer. Or if I feel that, oh, there is some advantage or there is some merit in that paper, we may invite 3rd reviewer just to get. So it's not really that simple process. Now, once this is peer reviewed and accepted articles and then are produced, which means typesetting and posted online, all those promotion article, Web of Science, Google Scholar, these are promoted there. So now this whole circle, it's not really that simple. And also, I forgot there that manuscripts can also be rejected after it has been accepted by reviewers and editors, because these guys won't check your plagiarism. Plagiarism will be checked by the journal. And if it is, for example, more than 20%, in my case, I feel some people, they put only 15%. We may reject because, and I think it's not really just that percent number. It also depends on whether a whole paragraph is taken from another published paper. So you need to be very, very careful. I will give 1 or 2 examples later on when we discuss about plagiarism. Now, preparing your manuscript. I will touch that briefly, but these structures already. And also we know there are 2 types of articles. One is original or research article. Another is review article. Here I am talking about a research article, not a review article, okay? So a standard research article, this follows a research basic structure. Most of them I can see from the list of participants, they are young researchers. So you may have already done your master's or PhD thesis. So these standard headings, overall structure. But it is very important to be aware of the purpose served by each section when we are talking about introduction or we are talking about material method, okay? And if you can follow this structure, I think that will definitely help you to begin the writing process and make your article easier to review. Also, make sure, and I will touch that in the results section, that readers, even nowadays we say reviewers' time is not unlimited. So make your article concise and as possible as, Now, already, but I want to repeat here, we have got title, after that it appears abstract, then keywords. This article, this title that hook the authors, convey your main message, and always a strong title and abstract will ensure your article is found, because when people search, usually they search in Google or and then they can easily find. Then comes introduction, methods, and I will discuss each of these one in detail. Results, discussion, conclusion. Okay, in the past or in conventional journals, I didn't see supporting materials, but nowadays you see supporting materials also, and that's very important. If you have lots of data, and I think always we don't really need to include each and every table or data. So that's the place where you can put your extra data and supporting materials. Acknowledgement, we will touch there, and references. All right. Now, before, I know that people are putting some comments, and there are 277 attendance. I don't want to ask any straight questions, but out of this section, just only I will give you 2-3 seconds, and when I say stop, you should stop. In your QA section, you can type what section you write out of this whole, what section you write first. Is it introduction, results, methods, acknowledgement? Do you want to type? And I will see, and then I will stop. Okay, now stop. Yes, it's a combination. Very good. Methods, introduction, results. Okay, methods, mostly methods. Introduction also. We should write methods. Okay. Now, I don't say that it's wrong or right, but I think you will understand what we want to, what we should do. Now, these methods always we need to write first. And why is that? Because one is while you are doing some research, if you have a 2-year study, if you can just start writing at that time when you start your experiments, I think that makes sense. Methods is the first thing. Sometimes what happens, and it all depends. Some of my papers, when at early stages were rejected, and that's not really, they were of a low quality, because I think they did not answer much, or and they were not really complete. So I used to have figures, and I used to have methods earlier, but now what I do, sometimes if I feel, or some people feel that, oh, my paper, it's not really enough data. So in some cases, I also make first figure and tables, and then see whether it's really feasible to write this paper now, or shall I go for more field trials. So it's not really hard and fast rule, but these two things go first, figures and tables and methods. And then we write results. And again, I think earlier also in my early career when I was doing PhD, yes, it's not really first time somebody making mistake. I had also results. I used to write results, but I think over time, you understand, you learn these things, okay? So then it comes results. Now, introduction, yeah, I forgot. I used to write introduction first before, starting trial, because I thought that, oh, yes, this is the why I am doing this trial. But you may know already that introduction is based on what you have achieved and how you justify. So always results, they don't really come what you want. Okay, sometimes you get unexpected results, or if you know already results, it's not really that research. So depending on results, we actually then modify our introduction. Okay, so that's why introduction is written after the result section. If you can see my hand, I think its introduction is this way. We start with very wide and goes narrow. And discussion is opposite. We start with our main results and then broaden it and make it, globally its importance and all those things. Okay, after introduction, it's discussion and then conclusion. In the end, it's not really title you decide at first. In the end, title comes because we know what are those your results, and after that you finalize this one, and then comes abstract. Abstract should be written in the end when you have grasped everything, okay? And then keywords. We will discuss each of these in details. If you follow this process of building this article, I think it will be very easy, more logical, more effective, and I think you will not really waste much time, and you will also understand each and every step. I hope this is all clear. Title. Now, titles should be concise, but there are certain characteristics. What we need to do? One is it should attract the reader's attention, okay? Also, don't really put anything. For example, I will be a little bit biased here. I'm a weed scientist. I will give you some example related to that one. If someone has done work on weeds and they controlled one weed species, and in title they mention reducing food security, that's not really okay. So I think it's not really that type of jargon we need to use. It should attract the reader's attention. And to attract that one, you should not use that type of title, okay? It should contain fewest possible words. Some journals, they actually ask you to put maximum, for example, 15 or 20 words. So you need to really read their guidelines. The title should adequately describe content and be informative, but concise, okay? So we should have, and it should identify the main issues. And later on, we will discuss a little bit about some of these ideas here, what we can do. For example, we should be careful with the witty or creative articles. They are always welcome, but we need to be careful. And you should only do if this is relevant and within your measures. Consider if a title meant to be thought-provoking might be misinterpreted because you think that, oh, this is very attractive article, but sometimes it may be might be misinterpreted as offensive or alarming, okay? And nowadays, some journals, they have their editorial office, they may actually propose an alternative article, but I think I feel this should be the responsibility of an author or the authors, okay? Also, we should avoid jargon or acronyms, as I mentioned, the jargons, or sometimes we use acronyms. I will give one example, because in South Asia, now this dry seeded or direct seeded rice is coming. Everyone, whenever we talk, they are talking about DSR. They don't know outside of that reason, people don't know what is DSR means always direct seeded rice or dry seeded rice, okay? So it's not really that one. So we should really avoid these type of acronyms, okay? Also, avoid vague and ambiguous titles. And that's, for example, you know, when our title starts with towards or a description or preliminary study on XYZ or role of, effect of. So this type of titles are not really preferred. Mm-hmm. Now, I hope people are getting the result. Okay, yeah, that's good. Now, next one is abstract. So once we see, and you need to really see if you are from a developing country or you have difficulty in accessing some kind of journal, what you see first? You try to type in Google and you try to find title. So what happens if the title catches your attention? What's next? Then you want to read it's abstract, okay? So abstract is very, very important. Why? Because papers sometimes you need to pay, but for abstract, they are freely available. So authors, even if they don't have really access to your whole full paper, they will read abstract. So that's why abstract is very important. And it's available in these indexing services, including Scopus or Web of Science. And abstract always should be a single paragraph. Some journals now, they want only 200 words. It's very hard to bring everything in 200 words. But in general, what you need to bring, 4 things. First is, what's your problem? For example, again, I will be biased towards weeds. I will say X weed is a problem, is the most problematic winter weed in this country. Then you need to bring brief method. A field trial was conducted to evaluate XYZ. Then you need to bring results. Always remember, we always have lots of results, always maybe 20 tables, but paper is not really about putting all tables. We need to really give very brief. So in abstract, you need to bring very briefly your main results. And the 4th one is conclusions or implications of your studies. This is very important. So these 4 parts, we need to bring in a single paragraph. Some journals actually ask you, I think their maximum limit is 500 words, but I have seen some have only 200 or 250. So I think to me, it's an art if you can bring everything there. Also, one thing I realized, many these abstract, 50-60% times I see these are all qualitative. What does that mean? If you don't see, if you have done a field trial, and if you don't see any value, that makes, and at least for me, and later on John can add, but for me, it's like a dull abstract because it's not really giving you any value. So I think you try to quantify that one rather than giving just quality. Yeah, I can understand it in sometimes review, but in a research article, try to give some values, yield losses, or in terms of percent or something, whatever, or in bracket. Okay. So now the abstract should be clear, interesting, understandable, and brief, because this acts as an advertisement for your article. Because as I mentioned, it's freely available via online searching and indexing. And you should make, and you want to make it as catchy and accurate as possible to have the greatest impact, okay? Second is, think of your broader audience when writing your article, okay? A clear abstract will strongly encourage the readers to read the rest of your paper. And I see that sometimes if your abstract is not really clear, and sometimes the people think that, oh, this author or these authors are just trying to catch our attention by giving this abstract, they will not really read your whole paper. So it's very important that you that strongly encourage the readers. And as I mentioned, write this last so that you have the full story of your paper. I will touch that one later on again, but this one and the summary or conclusion you write at the end of the paper are very different, okay? They serve very different purposes. So to me, this is one of the most important element. And also sometimes editors' decision, not always, to read or review a paper often relies on this one. I at least don't really rely on only abstract, but I think some editors may, okay? Now, keywords, they are the labels of your article and are used by indexing services such as Google or Scopus. And it's good keywords always can make your article more discoverable. As I mentioned, I think if I'm not wrong, keywords should be different from your titles, okay? Because what happens, title already is there. So when we search something, words from titles already come. So these keywords should have words different than your titles, okay? So check the journal website, and most of journals, I feel, I think they need at least 5 keywords. Like in Frontiers, it's between 5 to 8, okay? Also, avoid words that have broader meaning and be specific, okay? Keywords should be specific enough to give someone a very quick idea about the content of your paper. Also, in the end, use only established abbreviation like DNA. As I mentioned earlier, don't use like DSR and all those things. I'm talking about in keywords. Now, introduction. As I mentioned earlier, keep this thing. It is wide, broader, we start, and it goes narrower, okay? So after the title and abstract, it's introduction. The audience will read. It depends on the audience. I think it's not really that important. And the introduction is your opportunity to provide context for your work and to show readers and reviewers why your research topic is worth reading about and why your paper warrants their attention. All right. So some key points. As I mentioned, we start broadly and then narrow it down. This will help position your research topic within the broader field and making the work accessible to a broader audience, not just to a specialist in your field. Okay. Also, in the introduction section, we need to state the aim, objectives. Some journals I know in this Weed Science Society of America, they always want that the last paragraph should have aims or objective. Okay, so state the aims and importance of your work. Make sure you clearly address that what is the problem you are ultimately trying to solve. Okay, this is very, very important. Also, your introduction should identify the solutions and limitations. What are those solutions and what are its limitations and what's your work trying to achieve? I think that comes again and again. So introduction is just about justification of your work, okay? And you should have a clear question. I will give you again, I give my example because I was very, very poor in this type of paper or even research. I used to actually finalize my treatments first. Then, and when I was doing PhD or first time when I was exposed to this environment, and then I realized that was totally wrong. You should not really. First, you need to really identify what's your questions. And once you know your questions, what you want to answer, then you can change those treatments or whatever you can do with treatment. So it's not really, and I can see mostly people coming from South Asia, because I have got lots of collaborators, they first design treatments. So I think it's very, very important. First, we should really understand research question. And also when I ask them, they sometimes can't answer, what do you mean by research question? So research question is, it's the same thing. It's, it's there within your, whatever you are doing, but that comes with a different format. So you need to really tell us what you want to answer through this research, okay? And always don't bury your readers in details. So stick with the general overview and avoid giving too many unnecessary citations. Sometimes I have seen that at the end of a sentence, there are 7, 8 references. No, and I think here I want to add one thing. We should always give credit to the original researcher or researchers who gave that idea about that paper. Yes, sometimes people ask for new research. Yes, new does not mean that you need to cite those ones which did after 20 years or 50 years. I think definitely we should give credit. So here, just giving them credit, don't really put too many unnecessary citations, okay? Provide a perspective that is consistent with the journal where you are submitting, okay? And also introduction. Again, there are many weed scientists I can see here. Some people, if they are used, or even insect entomologists, if you are studying pest biology, sometimes your introduction may be very similar because it will be always about that pest, and then what you want to do or your research question, they will be most of the time very similar. But always try to come up with a new introduction, okay? So people, they try to, and I also did sometimes, and I think my collaborators still do, they do reuse introductions from previous papers, but I think we should really always present a new result, new introduction, and work should be specifically motivated, okay? So it means we require a unique introduction every time. Now, next one is methods. To me, I think this is very important, and this is the most important one if you are supervisors or a senior scientist, if you want your students to conduct similar trials. So you can easily recommend one paper, and if they can follow that paper, their methodology, and if they can repeat the trials, I think that will be the best thing. But not always this happens. That's why I think this method section, some people, they hide things, sometimes it's not clear. So this method section describes how you studied the problem, okay? Think of it as a roadmap leading to the core of the research, guiding the readers through the actual journey the authors took to reach their destination, okay? Seems very easy, and to me, if we see the whole manuscript, it may be the easiest part, but I think we actually miss most of these important details there. And then sometimes reviewers come back, and it can be missed very easily if reviewers, they are doing same work, and sometimes if they have similar interest, and because they have got the same knowledge, they may sometimes forget that you have already explained everything in the method section. So it's very, very important that details are given. So a knowledgeable reader should be able to reproduce the experiment, as I mentioned earlier, okay? So I think this first point, this usually depend on journals. I personally don't write for every experiment rational behind your choices in the method section, but yes, somewhere, for example, if I'm studying 7 levels of salinity, their impact on crop or weed emergence, there I just give one sentence that these salinity levels represent salinity occurring in fields of Australia or northern region or Asia or whatever, okay? So I think it's preferable. So you can give that small, very brief, explain the rationale behind your choices of those, I think not experiments, mainly about those treatments. Also, provide all details meticulously. Dividing the methods in terms of experiments helps the readers follow the section better. So you should really divide that in sections. And also you should check the journal's guidelines, because sometimes they don't really allow you, or sometimes they say that you should have some subheadings, okay? And follow the order. I think I should say, okay, nowadays some journals, they want results first and then methods in the end. But in general, what happens is both. They should have the same order. So for example, if you have written methods, one experiment second, or you have sub-experiment 1, 2, 3, in the results section also, you should really follow that order, okay? Don't really change these ones. Visual presentation to help the readers follow the study design or methodology better. Visual elements like diagram, flowchart, tables be used. And also when we use those of these tables or figures, they actually help in breaking the monotony and make the absorption of complex information easy. Also, I think I may not be able to cover that later on, but in general, I have seen sometimes we use very long paragraph. I personally prefer, or I was advised by some reviewers when I was doing PhD, that you should have only 6 to 10 lines in a paragraph. And I see that I have got some postdocs or students, they just keep adding 2, 3 pages in single paragraph. That becomes very difficult. And that's why we added there that these diagrams, flowcharts, they help in breaking the monotony and make the absorption of making information easy. All right. Also, do not describe previously published procedures. Here, I mean, for example, in soil science, we have got some kind of, for example, if we analyze some kind of chemicals or biochemicals, and we don't really need to add 1 microgram of X and I did, and then 24 hours rotated and all those things. In this type of situation, or in this type of papers or experiments, we should really give that reference that they can refer. Okay, so do not really describe each and everything. And also, if you are working in the molecular biology area, there also how you extracted DNA. It's not really you need to add each and everything. You just refer that reference. Okay. Also, in the method, definitely identify the equipment. That is very, very important, so that, because nowadays there are lots of different kind of equipment. For example, you used a leaf area meter. Here, you just identify LI or LA, whatever number, okay, and also the stat package you used, for example, GenStat or SAS, so that people know how you analyzed your results, okay? So these are very, very important. And to me, or whenever my papers were rejected from some European journals, that were mainly because of the stat part. Some people, they are very critical. You should have explained very critically this part, how you analyze data. If you did 2 years trial, if you combine those, data over the 2 trials, what was the criteria? Okay, all those things, or whether you did some kind of transformation, like especially in weeds or pest numbers. Okay, so that's very, very important. Now, results, that's very important, and I think we know this because your whole paper depends on your results. But as I mentioned earlier, in thesis, we usually ask our students to take data very often, but that's not really, these papers are not really thesis, so you should not really put each and every data. For example, I know that in some countries, they ask students to take height, biomass, and all those data every month, 30 days, 60 days, up to 150 days. But for papers, you don't really need if they are not really related, okay? So we know always we have got lots of data, but you should present the results that are essential to the discussion. It means that only data of primary importance should be put in this one. Otherwise, other kind of data you could put in your supporting materials if it's needed. But do not really try to hide data or save it for second paper. I think one thing I can, from my experience, I can share here, when you are an early career researcher, you try to have more papers, okay? And I also did, I'm not really different. But what happens, you actually compromise with your quality. Definitely, you can't really write your discussion very strongly if you separate the same thing in 2 papers. Also, your conclusion will be very different. So you may have 2 papers, but I think in the end, it's all depend on citation, or people have cited your paper. If they see that, oh, you did only that crap work and only half data, I think people will not really read. So that's why I think it's very, very important. So don't really try to dilute the effect of the work, which may result in lower quality paper, okay? So don't write these comments. Sometimes you say that, these results could be due to XYZ. That's not really for results, that's for discussion. I want to add one thing here. Some journals, and I personally prefer results and discussion, they want in a combined section. And why I prefer, because there you don't really repeat results again and again. And some of our Weed Science Society of American journals, they actually want us to put results and discussion together. But that does not mean that always. Some journals, they want you to separate. Frontiers in Agronomy, as far as I know, it's flexible. You can have any choice. But when you have discussion separate, I think you need to really make sure that you don't really repeat, okay? So also, use subheading, as I mentioned. If something is always continuously, text coming from one end to another one without any subheadings, it's really hard to understand what you are trying to say. So use subheadings so that we can keep these results of the same type together, okay? And this will actually definitely make the results easier to review and read, okay? Also, some journals may have numbering systems, so you may number those sections, and some journals may not have, okay? And you can decide then a logical order of the data, so that tells a story and in an order, okay? Also, results actually highlights the main findings, so that further understanding in the field or those that differ from previous ones, okay? Also, it is very important, if you got some kind of unexpected results, definitely you should highlight that one in your results. And as I mentioned, we have already got tables and figures. If you have 10 treatments, you should not really need to explain each and every treatment. X was better than Y or A or B or C. We have got already tables. So there you just highlight the main findings, but if you feel that you have some kind of unexpected findings, definitely you can include there, okay? This one, I think it all depends on journals. I personally don't prefer that you always give p-values, because what I mean, and when people say in the results section, X was higher than Y, I always expect that you are talking about statistically higher, okay? You should not say that one is 41, one is 40, that 41 was higher, okay? If they are statistically similar, you should not really give. So that's what, but some journals and some people, they prefer that you should give p-value. That and to me, in our situation, we are not really doing that. We need that p-value at 0.001%. But I think in my case, mostly at 5% level. But this all depends on editors and reviewers, okay? Also, we need to include illustrations, figures, and tables, and they are most efficient way to present results. And I think without that, you can't really write, okay? So your data are the driving force of the paper. I don't really read results. If I am looking at in a paper, I actually see those figures or tables, what they have done, what kind of data is there. And if that is very, very messy, I don't really feel reading that whole paper, okay? So your figures and illustrations should be used for essential data only. The legend of a figure, you have legends at the corner, should be brief and should contain sufficient explanatory details. Also, your figure table or figure captions should be self-explanatory. What does that mean? We should not really need to go back to your method and see what are those treatments. Some people, they say, T1 to T9, that's treatment. No, I think here I don't want to go back. So you need to have full self-explanatory caption, okay? And also, as I mentioned, graphs are often used to compare experimental results with those of previous work or your calculated values. And they should not appear crowded. Try to present, very limited data sets. If you have, for example, a single graph and you are presenting 10 lines, it's really, really very complicated. We can't really see. So you try to separate that one, maybe with the 4 each, or so you should not really put too many lines or too many data sets there. Also, axes should be very clear, well-selected scales, and use different symbols so that, if I'm looking at a graph, I can easily see that, okay, this graph, this line means this treatment, okay? Also, similarly, tables, they actually give your actual experimental results, but do not really include very long, boring tables, okay? And sometimes I have seen there, but you need to really try to separate that one, or which is easy to understand, okay? Make them easy to read as possible, okay? Also, we sometimes need to include photograph or image. I suggest we should really have some kind of scale marker. For example, somebody is showing an actual seed or an insect, if we have a scale marker so that we know, or if you are comparing two seeds, for example, a weed seed with a crop seed, if we have some kind of scale marker so that people can compare that how bigger, how smaller. Otherwise, nowadays, we have got lots of good cameras. You can capture with the microscopic camera very large picture, and we may not be able to understand the clear size of that one. I hope this result section is clear. Now, discussion, one of my favorite topic, because I read that one if I need to really explain what's the meaning of my study, what's that mean or its implication in that country or in that state. So we expand, as I mentioned, discussion is opposite. So we go with very narrow and expand. So narrow in terms of in my area, go in this country, globally. So like that way, okay? So what's that mean? So that's the discussion section where you interpret your results. I want to add one important thing. I have seen people from South Asian and Asian countries, and I see Asian, I say because I have worked there, so don't really take me wrong. It may be some other countries also, but I have worked there in some of these countries, and I can see in the discussion section, and I used to also write, in this discussion, we say, similar results were reported by XYZ. That's it. That's not really result discussion. And still I am getting these type of papers. And I know that we have got an Indian Journal of Weed Science. We see the same kind of papers, the same kind of discussion. They write their good results, and in the end, in discussion, we write just similar results were reported by XYZ and finish. No, I think this is one of the most important section of the article where you get the chance to sell your data. And a huge number of manuscripts are rejected because their discussion is very weak, okay? And they just include only description of the results. So start by explaining what your problem you are trying to solve. So as I mentioned, very narrow, your focus, highlight your key findings. Then we compare other published results with your own, okay? And when we say that similar results were reported, I think it's better you expand that one, how they are similar. Or don't feel bad. I've seen that people in some countries, they were trying to show no-till system always better than conventional tillage. No, this is research. If you have done your research very honestly, very correctly, and if you have noted down everything, I can, challenge anyone. You can easily publish that paper if you can explain your reasons why you got that one. That's why I think when you compare, if you did not get similar results, you should have some kind of explanation, maybe your weather condition or slope or whatever. I'm just giving that, some examples. So do not ignore work also. I have seen some journals, they try to take, some papers, they try to take methodology of some other papers and they don't really cite them. So I think it's not really good. Do not ignore work in disagreement also. And confront it, convince the reader that you are correct or better or why your results are different. Also here in this section, we identify limitations. Okay, not always everyone, they do field experiments in the field. You may say that, okay, the limitation is we did this trial in the glass house. So therefore, to confirm these results, there is a need to do field studies. So that's limitation, some kind of solution. So we need to really give these type of suggestions. Also make sure the discussion corresponds to the results and complement them, okay? Do not simply repeat the results again here, as I mentioned earlier, okay? Also, justify your work, who can use this and why, how does this study advance knowledge in your field? So this is very important. That's why discussion is very important. And after writing this whole discussion, we write a conclusion section. Now, conclusion, don't really repeat the same thing as in abstract. These two things are very different, okay? And that's actually, here you can say, or you can suggest future research. And conclusion, it should be clear to help the reviewers and editors judge your work and what's its impact. So impact, implication, future research. Okay, so it should provide clear justification how your work advances the field. And you can suggest here its uses, extensions or application of your work. And don't list the experimental results here again. Okay, don't bring copied statements from your previous sections. And conclusion, always, you should not really have very long. Sometimes people want only 3 to 4 sentences. But I think this is the one where you should really have some kind of implication, future research. Okay. Now, next one is, I think I have, because most of these important sections. Next comes references, and these are actually list of papers you have cited. Okay, make sure you cite those papers on which your work is based on. I think that's very important. And do not use too many references. Some people, I've seen some journals, they want you to use only 3% of the total, length of manuscript, but it's all depend. Usually in review articles, we have got more references than in your research article, okay? And ensure that you have fully absorbed the material, and you may have seen that similar work was done recently and published by someone. Do not just ignore or feel that, oh, it's actually undermine your work. No, you should really cite, and you can give that one there. You should have some justification, okay? Also, avoid excessive self-citation. So if sometimes it's you can't really avoid. For example, I remember when I was a postdoc, I did a trial on sprinkler irrigation rice, and we did tested emergence of different weeds. But to compare those results, I had to cite my 9 papers or 10 papers. But I gave particular reasons in that letter, that because there is no information available on these weeds from other countries or from the same country, that's why I had to support from there. And they actually accepted. So if you have some your self-citation, you should really explain, or otherwise we should actually avoid, okay? Also avoid excessive citation from the same reason or same institute also. Also confront strictly to the style given in the guide for authors. I hope this is clear. Also, the next, acknowledgement, and this is a short text to acknowledge the contributions of specific colleagues. Also, I have seen some people, and also it depends on culture, but some people, they actually acknowledge their supervisors who are already on your author list. No, I think here we need to really acknowledge your advisors who are not in that list, who are not your co-authors. Also, financial supporters, somebody provided you some kind of equipment. Proofreaders, or somebody helped you in improving your paper, or suppliers who donated materials. So you should really acknowledge those people. Now comes this supplementary material, and I see that's a new thing. I didn't know that around 5-10 years back it was there in conventional journals, but this is also very important, that because as I mentioned, you need to give only important data in your results. You can't really give 20 tables. But if you feel that you have got some secondary data, you can actually include in the supplementary material, which will be attached there. And if somebody wants to see in detail, they can go and check this one. All right. Now, these were related to the structure of the paper. Last 4 or 5 slides, especially with the especially related to your language, why it's important, and some of these ethics. Okay. Manuscripts with the poor English language quality and grammar can experience severe delay. So as I mentioned earlier, I think we should really ask our colleagues or your supervisors, we should submit not really very poor. And I personally, I understand. I also don't come from English-speaking country, but I think this is very important. Your reviewers, editors, they don't really have time and they won't really improve your grammar. So you should really submit a paper with the good English language quality, okay? Also, you need to check whether these journals, they need American English or British English, okay? You need to check these journals. Also, keep the language as clear as simple. I know some people, they try to give more than one message in a single sentence, and then they have 3 to 4 lines sentence. And I think that actually complicates this whole thing. So you should have really clear, simple, brief sentences. Also use short, concise, as I mentioned already, correct sentences, and that correct tenses and grammar. Definitely, I have seen when you try to reduce those, rather than 4-line sentence, if you have 2 sentences with only 1 or 1.5 line, then I think you will have less chances of making those mistakes in your grammar tenses, okay? Always refer to journals, authors' guidelines. That is very, very important. People sometimes take, risk, or they think that, okay, let's try and see what happens. No, I think you don't really want that your paper is rejected continuously, okay? And also have a native English speaker check your manuscript or use a language editing service. I know in some countries, I suggested in Punjab Agriculture University in India, they asked these supervisors to have at least one co-supervisor from these countries who will actually act as a co-supervisor of that student, and they will also help to improve. So that type of things is going on in some countries, and also that's in terms of collaboration. But here, if you don't have that one, ask a native English speaker, check your manuscript. Also, don't feel that everyone will be ready, because it takes long time. And don't think that they will improve your whole manuscript from sentence to sentence, okay? Also, there are some kind of services, but yeah, it's up to you guys. Now, ethics and integrity, it's very, very important. Few things and I think most of you guys are already aware, but some people are making mistakes, and even or you don't know, means that's not real, that's against ethics, but I want to touch a little bit of there so that you don't really make the same mistake. One is first thing is to make who should be on your paper. In my field, because I don't do really rocket science, research, so it's not really that important. But definitely, where people have, if they are students, for example, they always are the first author. Or if they are working on medicine or some kind of patent thing, there this authorship is very, very important. So rather than you discuss this thing after conducting experiments, and when you write paper, it's always a good idea to discuss before you start these trials, okay? Okay. So authorship confers credit and has important academic, social, and financial implications, okay? Also authorship, when you give to somebody, that implies responsibility and accountability. Also, first author, what happens? Usually I feel in, figure is not really exact, around 80% work or more than that is done by the first author. They are the one who put this paper together, and then other authors, your co-authors, and they actually check those papers. Also very important, if somebody is co-author, it's your responsibility that you should really be able to defend those results. So if somebody asks, you should not say, I am only just co-author. If you are a co-author, you should really know each and everything. So if we come back again, as first author, they actually conduct or supervise the data analysis and proper presentation, and put the paper together and then submit to that paper to journal, because it's not really that easy 5 minutes job, okay? Then the last author is usually your team leader or senior scientist on the project. And most of the time, if you are a student, it's your supervisor. And as I mentioned, what's your co-author? That's actually all co-authors. They should make an intellectual contribution to the data analysis and contributes to data interpretation. They may help you in your data interpretation, but they must review each paper draft. Okay, that is very, very important. In some countries, people, if they are senior, they try to pressurize their main author just to want their name. But no, actually, this is, I will just check, I will cover this gift author. But here, I think these all co-authors should be able to defend these implication results and discuss the study limitation. I hope this is all clear. Okay. Now, what do we need to avoid? One is ghost author. What does that mean? Some people, they did work with you and you agreed that yes, you will be, and they will be your co-author. By chance, one thing is, mostly if they have left your institute, they have gone to other country, or now they are not really good friend with you. So you leave their name. That's called ghost author. So leaving out authors who should be included. So that's not really good. Second is scientific writer and gift authors. As I mentioned earlier, including authors who did not contribute to the work. So we should not really include. And if someone is not really in that list, they should you should include them in the acknowledgement section. All right. Now, most important one. What are those? When writing a paper, there are serious issue, ethical behavior, okay, unethical behavior, I say, and that could degrade the scientific record and the reputation of your science, your discipline, and even your team in the broader community, okay? And it can unfairly affect the reputation of individual researcher, not only that one, your department and your university. So there are different ways that research cannot be considered original or some of these unethical behavior. One is fabrication. When you did not do any trial with previous papers, you try to make up research data. That's fabrication. Falsification, yes, you did trial, but as I mentioned, one example earlier that you thought, no, this treatment should get higher yield or something. So it means you try to manipulate your existing data. That's also unethical behavior. Third one is plagiarism, which is very, very common. It's not really, some people, they want to plagiarize or they want to copy, but sometimes you don't know. So I will cover a little bit about that one. But what does that mean when we copy previous work and then try to publish in our one? So what are those things? It's not really that simple, only you are taking data. There are different things. For example, words also. If you are taking some kind of, you can say a trend. For example, you have read an introduction section, and then you got some kind of trend, and then the same kind of introduction you write for another pest. So that's also plagiarism because you are following someone's, trend. So words or ideas here, I say. So plagiarism is one of the most common reasons for rejection. Okay. All the journals to actually check, but it's author's responsibility. And nowadays, most universities, their libraries, they have got some of this software which can check your similarity index. It can be Authenticate or some other tools. So I think it's very important. And some of these ones, even diagram, also important thing. Some of my co-authors, when they write chapters or review, they actually copy exact published figure or table in their review, and they cite that one. Do you think that is plagiarism? I don't want your answer. Yes, this is. And there are two ways. One is either you modify that one. For example, if someone has published a figure, you make that a table or modify it just according to their data. Second is, if you want to put as it is that table, you should really take the permission from the publisher. And that's really easy. Recently, we had a review article in Advances in Agronomy, and one of my that collaborators, they copied one table. So I found later on, but we asked that permission, and within a week we got that permission. So it's not really that difficult, but you should have some kind of permission if you are using exactly same figure or table. But I suggest you try to modify so that it becomes more innovative type or innovative type of figure. All right. Correct citation is also very important. Why is that? Because we need to give the credit of this work of others, and also that will avoid plagiarism. For example, if you have copied one sentence and if you don't really cite that one, it will look like that's your statement, but later people find that, oh, that was already done by XYZ. So it means you are in big trouble. That's why it's a correct citation is very important. So crediting the work of others by citation is important. One is to place your own work in context, also to acknowledge the finding of others on which you have built your research, and to maintain the credibility and accuracy of scientific literature. Okay. I think we are going over time. I will just try to finish this few slides. Other common reasons are, as I mentioned already, language, or sometimes missing incorrect ethics statements, incorrect article type, missing conflict of interest statement, as I mentioned earlier. Also, identifiable data and images without appropriate author statements. That's very important. Okay. So consent, as I mentioned earlier, that's important. So I think to me, this should not really be that difficult for you to understand about plagiarism. Nowadays, I think all universities, they have this type of software and they have this training so that you know this about plagiarism. Now, last few things, how do you choose a journal? So first, it's important to understand different publishing models. In the past, we had only one type of journal, like, if just I give example, field crop research or, this type of journals, or water management one. The traditional publication model, they allow authors to publish papers free of charge. So you don't need to pay. But then readers or your institute, they pay yearly subscription pays, and then researchers have access. But in recent years, we have got these two types, green open access and gold open access. So for green open access, what happens is you publish and then self-archive the work in a free access repository. And this is often free, okay? However, the publisher, they may retain this copyright of your work and impose an embargo where readers will not be available. It's not be available to readers, okay? So work will also not be promoted here unless you do yourself. But this is gold open access, which is like frontiers in agronomy. That means authors, they actually, or their institute, they pay an article processing fee. But these authors have this full copyright, and you have got full immediate global access, okay? So I think this is very, clear to you guys, what's green open access and golden open access. Now, when we choose a journal, it's very important. You should really need to know these 3-4 things. Who is your audience? You don't really want to put somewhere where in a journal where you don't think that it will go to your correct audience. If you are, for example, an entomologist, it will go to entomologist, okay? So I think your work aimed at the core participants in your specific field, okay? You should know your audience. Also, be realistic. So really your article really groundbreaking in the field, would it really be best served by submission to the top rated, most popular journal? So you need to really see whether some people, they think that, I'm just giving example, don't take me wrong. Some think that, okay, I submit this one to Science or Nature, and that's not really. So you need to really see. So be realistic. Also, we need to see where does it fit. Okay, it's all again related to your readers, who you are citing, and what your colleagues, co-authors, and supervisors are suggesting. But I think I always suggest, if I also find hard, I go to my journal, those references, and I see which journal I have cited the most, and that actually helps you. That may be one of the journal you should submit that one, okay? So always check your manuscript fits the scope, because that is very important if you don't want to delay a decision on your manuscript, okay? As I mentioned already, very important, clear and concise scope. You should investigate. Also, it's important, you don't really want to submit to journals, and I think we don't have time today to discuss about predatory journals, but some journals have, editorial board without any, and I'm not saying that all journals should have internationally recognized researchers, but if you see their reputation and all those things, there are some journals which are local, there you may not find, but I think it's all then up to the author, whether you want to submit to a local journal or an international journal. So definitely you should look at chief and associate editors. What's their reputation? Are they well known? Or some journals, just to get your money, they have put some names without checking their reputations. Quality, what kind of papers are they publish? How many views, downloads? So that's all depend. And I think usually, initially, students don't really check each and everything, but that actually help you, finding a good journal. Also, you need to check likelihood of acceptance or rejection rates. As I mentioned, some journals, if they have only 10%, and if you are in a hurry, don't really submit there, and then you try to keep sending those emails that, oh, I need this for my interview, can I have these results? So I think you need to really see likelihood of acceptance or rejection rates. And if you doubt, consult your colleagues, and also happy to hear from our Frontiers team. They can also help you, okay? So as I mentioned earlier, do not gamble by submitting your manuscript to more than one journal at a time. We may not have time, but I had in the past, when I was editor-in-chief of crop protection, somebody submitted there and also in Journal of Pest Science. And by chance, it was published at both places. I don't know, and that's why later on, that paper was retracted. So I think there are lots of bad consequences. So don't really want to do that one. So in the end, just one thing, Frontiers and most other publishers, they are member of the Committee on Publication Ethics. So check that your journal you want to submit, they adhere to these things. Peer review, they have got peer review process, clear. And also second is they have got editors, editorial board, or other governing bodies whose members are recognized expert in their field, okay? Also, it's not really here, but whenever people ask you, some reviewers, give their institutional emails, don't give Gmail. I found in the past, somebody from one country, they gave me David something with Gmail, and later on I found that David was from that country, which was where you don't see any David. So I think don't really gamble with these things. Last slide, sorry, I think I took over time, but I didn't want to rush here. This is our last slide. Keep your message clear, brief. Be honest. Don't overstate your methods or findings. Create a logical framework. It should have a story. When we used to have stories when we were kids, so the same type of, if it's a story, people can easily understand. There are some good links there, and set your work in context. Write well and make it enjoyable to read. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Nowadays, some journals, they don't charge you for colored figures. So I think you can put that one. It's most, to me, it's more important for your presentations. Also share your work with colleagues. Pick the right journal, that's very important. Follow the journal, that's very, very important. If one paper was rejected by a journal, if you submit to another one, don't really just submit as it is. Just read their guidelines. They may have different kind of requirement. Practice, practice, practice. Don't really, I think that's the key. There is not really any magic stick. You touch there and you will learn to write paper. If at first you don't succeed, what will you do? Sit back? No, I think I don't. To me, that actually, or even I tell my students, that give us more energy. That, and sometimes our papers are actually accepted in a higher impact factor journal, because those, when there's rejection, they provide you good comments, constructive, you can improve your paper. With that one, thank you very much. And yeah, I hope you all had clear.
Oh,
all right.
Okay, Bhagirath, thank you very, very much indeed. It's an extremely comprehensive presentation you've made, and I'm sure that people will have gained an enormous amount of information about how to go about writing papers and getting them published. Thank you so much.
Shall I stop sharing? Shall I stop sharing or what?
What does Helen say?
Yeah, you can stop sharing your screen, Bhagirath, if you want to.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you again for that. Extremely comprehensive, and there are some very, very good points that one's heard there. I think one of the important ones really is that you don't write a paper in the same order as you read a paper. That's a strong message, that you don't write a paper in the same order as you've read a paper. I think that I liked your point at the end about you're basically trying to tell a good story. I think that's very important, a comprehensive and inclusive story about what you've done. I think also we should bear in mind that there's a lot of information that's been presented, and I think that one of the things we should remember is that people who've attended will be able to see this presentation again on YouTube. So there's a lot of information being presented, and I would strongly advise you to have a look at the presentation on YouTube. We put a lot of text in the pictures, in the slides, because we wanted to be very comprehensive and allow people to go back to it again and reread what Bhagirath has been saying. And I just would add that I think one of the things that is really also very useful for young scientists is to read papers. I mean, is to go back and start reading papers and see how these papers have been constructed. You could find a journal, you could look in Frontiers in Agronomy, there are other agronomic journals as well. I mean, just look at how these papers have been put together. So with that, I think we should move towards the question and answer session. I think I still want to use half an hour for this, even though we've overrun time a bit. But I want to give people as much time as possible to ask some questions. I've been looking, there's some very good questions already. So what's the first?
And just to say that we will, if we don't get to your question, we will make sure that we answer it in a follow-up email, and there will be space again. There's a questionnaire afterwards. So if you think of another question that hasn't been answered, please just pop it in there and we'll get back in touch with you.
Yes, that can I just say one more thing? I think, as we said right at the beginning, this is the first time that we've run this process, and your feedback to us is really, really important here. We would really appreciate any feedback, both positive and negative, that you like to present us with, because of course we hope this is not the last time. This is the first time. This is definitely not going to be the last time we're going to do this. Anyway, with that, let's move forward to the questions and answer, please.
Sure. Okay, so we got a lot of questions about actually doing a literature review, so for your introduction and for your discussion. So do you have any advice there on how to do a good introduction, how to do that literature research?
John.
Yeah. So this is about trying to find literature which is relevant for your paper.
How do you do that literature review? Yeah, how do you find those papers?
Well, I think there are two ways in which you can do it. Of course, you can use search engines with keywords to try and find papers which have been published in that area. You can also go to journals which have focused on the topics that you're interested in and see what they've been publishing in the last 5 years. I mean, I've done that quite recently, in fact. And you can see what kind of papers they've been publishing, and and literature reviews. If you're writing a research paper, of course, the literature reviews are not so they don't have to be as comprehensive as if you're writing a review paper. I remember when we wrote the IPCC chapter for food security, we had 600 references. I mean, you would never have that in a research paper. And I mean, and Bhagirath gave a sort of indication of perhaps the ratio between the length of the paper and perhaps the number of references you should include.
Great.
Next question.
The next question is, do you have any tips on how to publish negative results? How do you paint the data in a positive light?
Yes, that's a very good question.
There is no negative result, actually. Don't say negative result.
Yes, that's a good answer, Bhagirath. I mean, if you've done some work and your conclusions and your results are not the same as another paper, that's actually a very positive message. In fact, I mean, that's how science proceeds. Science doesn't proceed by everybody agreeing with each other. I mean, science proceeds because one person says they have this particular hypothesis and test it out, and another person says, no, I have this other hypothesis. That's how you synthesize. I mean, science is a process of synthesis, and not that everybody is agreeing. I mean, you look at the history of science, there have been huge arguments. I mean, huge arguments in physics, for example. I mean, huge arguments about science. So I agree with Bhagirath. I don't think you think of there are negative results that you. I mean, even if you have a result which says, well, this doesn't show the same as, we haven't had a positive, there isn't a positive correlation, for example, there isn't a positive regression index. That's not a negative result. You have to put your results in context of what other people have done. And that's what you do in the introduction and in discussion.
We've just had another question in that says, how long does it take to prepare an article? How many hours should an author spend writing one article?
Yeah. One of my most cited articles I wrote in a weekend. And one of the papers that I thought was some of the best stuff that I've done took me months to write. The most important thing, I think, is to be well prepared. And this is why we've tried to suggest, the reason why to start with methods is because that's something you've done that. You can describe what you've done. And then you've talked about what results come from that. This also follows logically. And then you talk about the discussion and then finally the introduction. So I think you can reckon on a couple of months really to write a paper. It's a very intensive process though, because you can go through many different versions of it. I mean, it's like asking Tolstoy how long it took him to write War and Peace, really. I mean, there are things that you can write quickly and things which that take. I don't know what Bhagirath says, but I would say 2 or 3 months would be
yeah, I'll just compliment that one, that it will all depend. If you are a new writer or a young writer, it will take time, and over time, as I mentioned, that practice. Maybe after a few months or years, you will be able to write the same type of article in a few days. So, and also it depends on your interest. But some articles also, as I mentioned, I can write in 2 days if they are my favorite subject, and if I know I have got everything clear here, that what I want to address. But as I mentioned, if you don't really have clear question, and if you have not read much about those papers, that will definitely take time, because as discussion, you can't really write without reading things or introduction. So I think that will all depend. So initially, yes, it may take even more than a month, because when you write anything, it's not really 24/7 you are writing that article. You have, so I think it may take some weeks. Yep.
But I think my personal experience has been that it's writing a paper. I don't think is something that you just do. You do for a couple of hours, then you do something else, then you go back to it maybe 4 days later. And I'm now a retired professor, but when I was working in the university and was writing, then I would block out a week for writing a paper. So I would say, sorry, I'm writing a paper for this week, and that's what I'm doing. And so it takes time to get back into it again. If you are, particularly a young researcher and writing your first couple of papers, you really have to concentrate for a period of time. And it is a tough process. There's no doubt about it. It's a difficult process writing scientific papers, but if you want to have a career in science, that's what you have to do.
We've had a few questions about merging the results and discussion sections. So when should you do this and when should you avoid doing this?
I think you should almost always avoid doing that, because what often happens is that there's two things. One is that you should be essentially presenting your results without comment. So you're presenting strictly what you found out, and that comment and that that comes later. So I think it makes it clearer if you are very strict about how you report your results just as results, and then you can have another section where you talk about the importance of these results and how they fit into the general area that you're writing in. I think another thing which happens sometimes is that when people, you should avoid, is when they've written a results section and then they can't think of anything to write in the discussion section, so they rewrite the results into the discussion section, whereas that's not really what the discussion is about, putting your results in the context of the rest of the area that you're interested in. It's not about repeating the results in the discussion section. So I think two things. I really don't recommend mixing the two, and I don't recommend you trying to repeat the results, writing them into the discussion section. I don't know whether Bhagirath, if you have a comment on that.
No, I think I am totally opposite. So what happens? We have our conventional journals are from Weed Science and Weed Technology. They are from the American Society. They don't allow you to write them separately, results and discussion. Okay. Always you need to combine. And okay. I have seen always they don't really want you. And in some journals, that's why I always keep that flexible. What I have found, because I think result and discussion section, if they are separate, that's very interesting, because when you read the discussion, you should be reading a story, linkage, something, connection. So that's but I think not always, not everyone can do that one. So what I have seen that when people usually they keep repeating things and discussion is not really that one. That's why I feel if they combine in my section at least, then there is not really that repetition. Because of that reason only I prefer these combined ones. But if they, and we are flexible in frontiers in agronomy, if they can separate them and if they can really avoid that duplication of results in discussion, I think that will be very handy. But I think not always, that always depends on journals, because not all journals will allow you to separate your results and discussion.
No, okay. So I think the message is see what the journal requirements are, and then try and follow the journal requirements, I think. Yeah, yep. Good point.
You can always email the journal or your editor if you're confused, you'd like to combine them. Maybe they don't do that, but maybe they'll be flexible for you. So always get in touch with the journal if you have any questions. They'll always be happy to talk to you. Okay, I've got an interesting question in now. Are imperfect results worth publishing? For example, you have 2 harvest periods and harvest 1 goes perfectly, but the harvest 2 you lose 1 treatment due to unforeseen circumstances. Is it worth putting in the effort to get your work published here?
Yeah, that's I find it difficult to, if you're in a, if you have a journal of agronomy, then publishing the results from 1 year of trials, I don't think is really, I mean, it doesn't allow you to look at inter-year variation. And so I think you're in a situation where you're going to have to do some more experiments. And it's unfortunate, but sometimes this happens with in experiments. One other thing that just comes to mind is that there may be, if you've had a bad year and you've lost some of the trial, are there any? Is there anything else that you can get out of that that experiment? Maybe not the whole experiment, but is there part of the experiment that maybe hasn't been affected so much? Then you might be able to rescue some of the data from the experiment. The other suggestion would be that if you were able to do that, then you could just write a short communication paper. So you're not actually trying to write a full paper, but you're just trying to, you can write perhaps a short communication. Yeah, but I think really you're going to have to go back and do some more work in the field, I'm afraid. Yeah.
No, that's good. I think he mentioned that if you lose one treatment, I don't know, if you have only 3 or 4, 2 or 3 treatments, then definitely you can't really do. But if that will all depend on, and I don't know what's your expertise or your area, but if there are, for example, 20 herbicide treatments, and if you lose one there, then you can really publish that type of work. But I think it will all depend on what is that one particular treatment which was lost due to some kind of circumstances. But if it is very critical, and if in first year, if it was the one which gave you highest yield or something, then definitely I think you are compromising your results. Thanks.
Great. Is it considered plagiarism if I submit an article to a journal like Frontiers in Agronomy based on my PhD thesis, whose record can be found on the university repository site online? This might be more of a journal question.
No, it is not. Yeah, sorry.
Well, no, I agree with you. I don't think that's, a PhD is a academic qualification. Mm-hmm. I've certainly published 2 or 3 papers out of my PhD, but they were rewritten so that they went into the New Phytologist, I think. So that I don't regard, that's not regarded, I mean, you can refer to the PhD, but you're not actually plagiarizing there, I don't think, because it's the original work you've done for your PhD, and you're reporting that to the scientific world. What do you think, Bhagirath?
No, totally agree. But I think you should really mention this in your cover letter, that this work is from my PhD, so that editors or editors, they know that it's not really, because that will come like, when they check plagiarism or that tool or even journals, that will come like 30%, 40%. But if you mention that in your cover letter, that this is from my thesis, or also sometimes, conference papers also. In conference, what we do, we try to present for the first time. But when we write a full paper, we have got more than 1 year and more than this conference data. But actually the same thing you have presented some time ago in conference, that's also not plagiarism. So, but if you write that one in the cover letter, then I think there should not be any problem.
Yeah, I agree, exactly. I've got one question here that says, sometimes it feels like there's an author bias that exists in peer review. So when the authors are more important than the content, do you have any advice for young researchers on what to do and how to avoid this?
Yeah. Yes, this is an interesting question as well. I think that clearly, I mean, I know some people in different countries in the United States, for example, they get their papers published in Science and Nature just because of who they are, unfortunately. I think this opens the question about how you build a scientific career, and I think one of the important things in this building a scientific career is establishing networks. And how do you do that as a young scientist? Well, I think you do this by being very proactive. So you get involved in scientific societies. You get involved in if you're in the UK, the Association of Applied Biologists, for example. And then when you become in that, then maybe someone will say, well, would you like to join this committee in the Annals of Applied Biology or something like this? And you will get your name known. This is the question. You will then start to establish a scientific network, and then then that can expand, and then that can put you in contact with some of the people who are the leaders in the particular area that you want to work in. So you have to build your profile really, and I think that there comes a point in a scientist's career when they have a chance to do that, when they will be asked, if they've done a good job, would you like to join the editorial board of this journal, for example? So I think if you're thinking about how you can get in to be working with some of the best people in the area, you need to think about how you build a scientific profile and how you establish a good network.
Okay, so I've got another question about getting your article rejected. What do you suggest about resubmitting a rejected article?
What do you think, Bhagirath?
Okay, so there are, I don't know, there are 2-3 things. One is, if usually editor will actually suggest you, in some journals, I know in Weed Science, what we do, either rejected and future submission not allowed, or they say that resubmit. And that's how it depends. If they found that, okay, you did everything in a wrong manner, or you needed more than 1 year data or etc., they will not allow you to resubmit the same paper in the same journal. Usually you get from that response, when you get that rejection letter, that whether they allow you to resubmit or not. If they say, yes, you work on these things, XYZ, you had this problem, so you, after that you resubmit, and it will again go through a review process. So it's all depend on, but if they have not really mentioned that you don't resubmit, then you should really try. And to me, if you have answered most of these things, then I think there should not be any problem. But if one reviewer said that you should have 1 more year data, and then you resubmit, and if it goes to the same reviewer, they are not really very positive. They will say that I have already done, you need to do. So that's why I think you need to read those comments very carefully, what they have suggested. I think that's what.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you have a paper which is rejected, then I think it's completely legitimate for you to write to the, to the editor and say, if I make the suggestions, can I resubmit this paper to your journal? I mean, it's completely legitimate for you as an author to do that. Even if you get a rejection, you can always say, I accept this point and this point and this point. I mean, this has happened to me. I'm talking personally here. This has happened to me as well. Is that you can then say, okay, well, thank you for your comments. But one of the things, you have to be very polite. Don't say this, you've been a really stupid idiot and why have you rejected my wonderful paper? This is not going to get you anywhere. So you have to be polite and say, well, thank you for the comments. They're very serious comments, and I feel I can address these comments in a revised version of the paper. Would you be open to looking at this paper again if I, you need to write it in that kind of nice, polite way, and then they'll say either yes or no. So I would always, you can always ask for a second opinion, really. That's basically what I'm saying.
Agreed. And you should get some feedback if your article's been rejected, why that's happened.
Yeah.
A bit of a follow-up question for this. It seems that some people are getting their articles rejected because they're too descriptive. Do you have any advice on how you can write a non-descriptive article, or how you can improve that aspect of the article?
I'm not sure what's meant by descriptive article. I don't know really what that. You mean, are they saying that it's a qualitative paper, or is it something which is? I think if you're writing papers for a scientific journal, then you at some point have to put some quantitative data in there. I don't think you can't. I mean, there are, well, just let me think back. There are journals, for example, I know the Journal of Ecology in the UK, where people have described a species. So they'll do the taxonomy of a species, which is a very descriptive process. I mean, you're describing a particular species of oak tree, for example. That's a descriptive paper, but they're very rare. I think if you're looking at the main agronomy journals, they would include data and analysis of data and the presentation of hypotheses and what we've been talking about this morning. So I think I don't really understand what's meant by. I don't know whether you have an idea, Bhagirath, for what is meant by a descriptive paper. I don't quite get it.
I think I just get from there, it's descriptive means you have, just as I mentioned, if you have 2-3 tables and you have explained each and every treatment, what is higher than lower, or means all about those data. So that's what I feel actually descriptive, rather than just making that, very concise or brief. So if sometimes the people, they just explain each and every treatment.
Or just
yeah, that's what I.
Data.
So I don't know. Yeah.
So they're just submitting data and without.
Yeah, just data. And for example, if it's 3 tables, they compare each and every treatment with each other. That's what we don't need, as I mentioned in my presentation. We need to give only brief because we have got tables. So mainly we need to focus on other things. For example, how your data is supported by other previous steps. Yeah.
I think that from our experience working on the journal, just when you're writing your paper, it's really handy if you make sure that it's very question driven and very hypothesis driven. So you don't just go in like, we did this experiment and here are some things. Make it clear that you're asking a question and you're answering it. So from our side, I think this is discussions with other chief editors. This is what we've had before that's been rejected because it's descriptive. So yeah, make sure that your question is really, really clear when you're submitting.
I mean, I think Bhagirath made a really good point. In the introduction, you start off very wide and then you narrow down. You do the results and then you move out again in the discussion. So you move out from the narrow to the broad. You start with the broad and go down to the narrow. It's a bit like an hourglass, You start off broad and then you go down to the nitty-gritty of what you've done, and then you try and put this in the context of a wider discussion. So it's like an hour. You have to think of the model of an hourglass, basically.
Okay, I've got one more question here. Is it possible for someone that has a master's degree to publish a manuscript alone, or would they need to communicate with a PhD student or a professor to let them be supervised?
Anybody, yeah. If you have data from an experiment you've done as a master's, you can of course always submit that to a journal. If I think back to my own career, I did a project in my final year. And when I was a bachelor student, and I published. So, yes, you can do that.
But you need your supervisor. I think that's also one ethics. Who supervised your work, or who paid, or there. Yeah. So what he is asking, whether you need PhD student or professor to be a supervisor. No, it's not really. I'm not thinking about this position as professor, but you should have your supervisor. The same thing applies to them. They can't publish your paper, your student's paper, without your name. So it's the same thing there. So
yes, I think that's a fair point. You could publish a paper on those terms, but I think you would be you would have to include your supervisor or someone as a co-author in that, I think.
Yeah, who supervised your master's degree.
Yeah, or the supervisor of your master's. Yeah, yes. I don't think you would do it as a standalone paper from. You'd have to include co-author, your co-authors of some kind.
A little bit similar to that, we've got someone else that's asked, what is the best way to inform a co-author that a manuscript has evolved and their contributions have now been removed, so they don't qualify to be a co-author? How do you approach that?
Sorry, I missed this one. What was the question? Yeah, John.
No, I didn't. Say it. Can you say it again, Helen? I didn't quite get it.
So it's what is the best way to inform a co-author that they're no longer on a paper? So their contribution has been removed, the paper's changed into a different direction, and then their contribution is no longer going to be part of the manuscript, so they're being removed as a co-author.
I think I suggest that you did wrong for the first time. Why you included them for the first time and then you are removing second time? Because when we read these guidelines, we include co-authors who have actually contributed to your papers. Even if you change things, I don't see any reason why you remove one because you have changed that paper to a different direction. So I don't know if they were there earlier. If you are removing total content from that paper, then I think it's okay. Otherwise, I feel no, that's not really, should not be allowed. Don't, yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with it. It's something that needs to be sorted out before you start writing the paper, and make sure that you know that their contribution is visible. I think. I mean, if you change the direction of the paper, then fair enough. Then you can have a new group of people who are the authors of it. But I think if you've set off and you have a paper, then and the people have actually contributed, then you can't take them off at that point.
Okay, so I've got one that's a bit more focused on a PhD thesis. So we're saying that for papers, it's important that you only include results of primary importance. Is this the case for your PhD thesis as well?
No, I'll add just one, because as I mentioned in thesis, what happens? What is a thesis? If it's a master's or PhD doctorate, there we are actually learning lots of things. Even if you have done something or you have, you can say that finalized one method or refined something, I feel everything should go in your thesis. So thesis is a document of how you come up with your final results and all those things. So that's a process. So I suggest in thesis you should include, but yeah, definitely some universities, they have got maximum word limit. There you may need to reduce there. So I think in thesis, I don't really feel that you should try to reduce and put only main results. Yep. That was the question, Helen?
A PhD is an academic qualification. It's also a training process. I mean, the PhD is also a training as a master's is. So you have to bear that in mind, I think, about what actually a PhD is, and work on the basis of that.
I've got another question here about some people are doing some research on that address really localized problems, but they want to publish in high-ranking journals that aren't just focused on the region. Do you have any advice on how to do that? On what journals you would suggest that take that kind of research?
Well, I think if you're publishing something which is highly localized, then you have to, I think, probably will go for a very localized journal, a national journal rather than an international journal. Yeah, I think that you have to cut your journal according to how this will be seen internationally and also nationally. I think that would be more of and if it's referring to one particular area in a country, then I think you really should be looking at national journals rather than international journals. What do you think, Bhagirath?
Okay, I think I see these things, especially when we submit to an American journal, although for them, everything is international, even if it is related to Florida. But when the paper comes from other countries, they say that it's localized. You should really publish in a regional journal.
Yeah.
I think I agree and disagree both. If one problem, if I just give example, I don't know what's that field, but if I give one particular weed or pest, if it is problem only in that region, people may not know outside of that region, then definitely that's related to that local region. So I think you need to really find where your mostly readers are, who know about this problem or this pest. So their international audience may not be that interested, or international journals. But the same problem, if it is in other countries also, okay, but you have worked only on your regional problem, then I think it will be all your art, how you make that introduction. I think that's why that introduction section is very important. If you can make that relevant to your whole country and then to the world, then definitely I think I have done some of this work while I was postdoc, some of these local problem, but those were also somewhere in other countries and similar work was done. So I put some kind of justification that American populations, they have got, we have got information on those populations, but from the Philippines, for example, there is not really much information. And that's why I think I related. So I think it will all depend on, if you read some of these papers, definitely you will have a better idea. So it's possible, but as I mentioned, if that pest is only in your area, it's not really known outside of that one, then it becomes very difficult to make it an international one.
So yeah, I think the story really is that you have to find a way of making your results internationally, contextual. So you have to find an international context for your results, which would then allow you to to legitimately try and put it into an international journal.
Okay, we're approaching 11 o'clock, so I'm going to ask one last
a couple more, I think.
And we've got all your questions though, so we'll make sure that we go through these and answer the ones that we haven't managed to get to today. So this one's a bit about networking. So how do you make those connections if you want to co-author with an experienced scientist in the fields? How do you go about networking?
Well, as I tried to say before, that you have to create a profile for yourself. I mean, you have to get known in the area as an active person, and there are numbers of ways of doing that. I mean, you will get opportunities to contribute to the development, of the particular area of science through academic societies and such things, and you should grab those with both hands, because that's how you get known. And when you get known, that's how you then start to move in the, that's when you start to be working together, or have the opportunity to work together with the top people in the particular field you work with. So it's not something you can do kind of overnight. It's something you've got to really work on.
I want to, sorry. Yeah.
Go on, no, Bhagirath.
Yeah, I want to add here. I think there are 2-3 things. When you mentioned that if you want someone co-authors, first thing is, if you have done any research trial and then you add some co-authors and ask them to provide feedback, that's to me a little bit it's very late, because what happens, and that's why I have got lots of collaborators from Asian countries. But what happens when you start any trial, it's better to ask those co-authors that whether you want to be on this in this trial, and because that's the time they can actually, with their experience also, they can tweak something which can make your paper very relevant to an international audience because of their experience. Also, I think that's one. Second is, I think for review papers, it's okay. You can ask them that, okay, I'm writing a review. Do you want to be a co-author on my list? It's up to them, yes or no, if they have time. But on a research paper, after doing all research, I think it's really, to me, not really that good also that you have done everything, and when you have written and then you ask your co-authors to improve that paper. Some people may If they have time and if they are okay, that's fine. But to me, I think it's a little bit late that at that stage, because I think by that time, if you have done something just only routine work, it's very, very hard to publish something. But I think people are also outside. They are also interested for this type of collaboration, and some people are interested in actually mentoring young researchers. So I think depending on their time, yeah, I strongly suggest you should really ask these ones. Okay, maximum what they can say that no. So I think definitely you should ask them.
Early, ask them early.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. With that, I will close the webinar. Just a huge thank you for everyone that attended. Like John said, this is the first time that we've run this, so please give us any feedback you have, and we're hoping to run this again next year. And just for me, thank you so much, John and Bhagirath, for being wonderful chief editors and for taking the time to give this presentation today. So thank you.
Okay, I'd like to thank Helen, because there's a lot of people in the background that we should also say thank you to, the people who've been taking the questions and the people who set this up, the people at Frontiers who made the presentation as beautiful as it was. That's also has taken a lot of time, and we're very grateful to the Frontiers backroom staff really to allow us to put this this webinar together. Thank you very much indeed.